here in Animal Crossing New Horizons, but unfortunately it's raining. It's just not the best weather for a cup of tea and a picnic. So I'll just head indoors because I'm about to record my weekly podcast. And as you know, I've got my own personal virtual podcast studio in my blue house near the beach. So let's head inside and record my my weekly show. Hope you enjoy it. You can, of course, always reach me in the comments if you're watching this after I've streamed it live, or if you're watching right now, you can also chat with me in the chat room. So here we are. This is my podcast room. I did get rid of the television. I put it in another room. And here's my recording desk. There's a bit of rain that you can hear coming from outside, but I don't think that's much of a problem. It actually gives a nice bit of calming background noise. If only it was this cool in, and I'm literally meaning cool in terms of temperature here in the Netherlands, but we are in the real world at the start of a heat wave. It is 31 degrees Celsius. Very warm. Fortunately, the room where I have my streaming equipment is still relatively cool compared to outside. I have my streaming, and there I hear myself because I'm in order to be able to read the chat. Of course, I need to log in to the video that I'm currently streaming. Hey, Lawrence. Hey, Jeja. Rodrigo is there. Peaceful dusk. Have you never seen my island before, Peaceful Dusk? Oh, wow. In Belgium, it's also very warm, Lauren says. And Jamie is there, too. Alrighty. So, let me get my show notes, and then we're good to go. And I may actually, during the show, go to other rooms and maybe even go outside for a walk. Why not? I try to make this is kind of making mostly an audio podcast, and I think like 99% of my listeners will never see this video. But for those that follow me on YouTube, I still wanted to create something that is visually interesting. And since there are a lot of Animal Crossing fans following me, I figured this would be the best thing to do. And my avatar is a lot cuter than I am myself. All right, I've got so much to talk about today. So I have my show notes. I think we're good to go. If you're ready, then I'm ready. Let me see. One more thing. I'm just going to put the chat on the left side of my invisible screen. I don't even know if Animal Crossing has computers. I'd love to have like a computer monitor in front of me just to make it... Oops. I didn't want to leave my chair. Just to make it even more... I don't know, realistic. Now I'll just pretend I'm using my Nintendo Switch as a computer screen. My virtual Nintendo Switch, that is. You hear the AC. Well, I think what you hear is the rain against the window in the background. Because I don't have air conditioning in my house. In my real house. Oh, this is so confusing. All right, here we go. Hello there, and welcome back to my weekly show. I'm Father Roderick, and it is a warm day here in the Netherlands. 31 degrees Celsius. That's in the 90s, right, in Fahrenheit? And tomorrow it's going to be even hotter. But here in the house, it is relatively cool, so I'm just going to pretend that it's not warm. I hope it's okay where you live. Both weather-wise, but also corona-wise, of course. It is still a very difficult situation in many countries in the world. Here in the Netherlands and in most of Europe, we seem to have the corona situation under control, which I'm very happy with. Today, it's Wednesday when I'm recording this. Our Prime Minister will probably announce even more relaxation of the strict rules, which will be, I think, very helpful for my work, because I'm about to start filming my TV show, and in order to do that, I need to be able to travel and maybe also have other people accompany me So all that was not allowed in the recent past. We had to have even if I wanted to go film, I had to and I needed, for instance, a cameraman and an audio person. All those people would have to travel with separate cars. Now, normally when you're working on an expensive production, that's not much of a problem because you can always get those costs back. But in my case, I would have to pay for all those, extra miles, extra kilometers. So I'm very happy that is also a rule that they're going to loosen or going to just take away. So anyway, it is a nice warm day here. I'm recording this, as usual, for those of you that are watching me live, in Animal Crossing New Horizons in my little virtual podcasting studio. And in the virtual world, it is actually raining. So, yeah, it's a bit of a mind warp. It's almost like podcasting from the Matrix, but then a very cute version of the Matrix.
You know what's going on? This is what's happening in your world.
Face it, Catholics rule. We got Boston, South America, the good part of Ireland, and we're making serious inroads in Mozambique, baby.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
So it's been a bit of a special week. We're moving our office stuff. I've been working for about 2 years now from an office in the center of the city. It's a building next to a church. However, the church is going to be closed. So the consequence of that is that we need to get out of the building next to the church. We've decided to not get another office, and I think that is a wise decision because we only have 2 people working for Tridio right now. So it's Inge, the longtime producer, also worked with me in the early days of podcasting. But last year we had 2 other people working, so it was kind of made sense to have an office. But now we can save a lot of costs by just not having to pay rent, which was quite expensive. It was like 900 euros, I think, per month. So that really adds up over time. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a workspace here on the ground level of the rectory where I live. I have a pretty big house right now, and I don't know what to do with all the spaces. So I'm going to move my living room upstairs, and then down here is where I will record both my video and my audio shows. And then I'll have the sunroom. I'll use that for meetings, and in case Inge needs to work here or we need to work together with other people, they can do that here in this room. The downside is we had to move all our equipment, all our office stuff today to get it, to prepare everything for the movers, because we're not going to move ourselves again. To move that to the town where I live. And it's always funny that once you start moving, you realize how much stuff you have. So there were bookshelves and still, I thought only a few books left, because I've gotten rid of about 80%, I would say, of my book collection 2 years ago when I moved here to this village. And most of my books are now on my Kindle, so I only kept the books, theology books and books concerning spirituality, stuff that you can't get digitally because, well, most of those books are out of print and there's not enough market for it to have digital copies of that. So I thought that we didn't have many books left there in the office. Unfortunately, it was still five boxes or something like that. Anyway, we've been working for 2 or 3 days now to get everything ready. And then here, where I live in my rectory, we still need to figure out a way to store all the equipment. And I don't have much in terms of shelves or storage space. Even though the rooms are very big, there are no cupboards anywhere. So maybe we'll have to temporarily store some stuff in the attic and maybe even get rid of some of the equipment that we don't need anymore. Anyway, it's probably the best thing we can do right now because it's too hot to go filming. I'll just wait for the weather to cool down again. But I did make a decision as to how I'm going to film my TV show. And it's going to be, I think, very interesting. I'm going to get a bike, a touring bike, and I will travel the country, literally. I'll go to all the far reaches of the country and take all my equipment with me on a bike. So I don't know what I'm getting myself into, but I've got the feeling that this could be an interesting way to produce a show. And traveling by bike itself will probably also create interesting story material because something tells me that it's not always going to be smooth sailing. Anyway, we'll see. So that's what's happening right here. I hope that by next week we'll be able to leave the office that we're currently occupying, hand in the keys, and then we'll probably still need a few weeks to put everything in place right here. But right now, this is where I've been working from for the past, 3 months now during Corona time. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm actually still very productive. And if it weren't for sometimes a little bit too much work, I think I'm totally fine here. Even the YouTube production is going well. I can record my reaction videos here in the living room, and actually makes for a nice decor. So yeah, I'm quite happy with the situation. All right, it is time to move over to the movie room here in my virtual house, because it is time to talk about a movie that I was looking forward to because I read the book on which they based the movie. And it premiered on Disney Plus instead of premiering in the movie theater. However, my experience wasn't as positive as I hoped it would be. So, oh well, what are you going to do? I'll tell you why.
How do you not like movies?
They're predictable. Like, the guy gets the girl and that kid sees dead people and Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Not liking movies is like not liking puppies.
They're fine. I just get bored and never make it to the end.
You know, you need a movie education. You need a movication. Now I'm gonna give it to you.
So I'm sitting here in the decor of what I hope is going to be my it's kind of like a drive-in movie theater. So it's like a parking lot. It looks like a parking lot. Right now I'm sitting on a red couch watching a flat screen TV. But someone is going to send me a car that I can place here, and I can sit in the car, maybe it's a bed. I don't know. Anyway, and then just going to create a little drive-in theater experience. So while the TV is playing in the background, I want to talk about the movie Artemis Fowl. And you heard me talk about the movie, and I think I even played the trailer. I can't remember if I did. And I told you that I was reading the books. I picked them up right before the movie premiered on Amazon in the Kindle store. They were on sale for just 99 cents. So I got the entire series, and it was great. I've been reading the first book, and I loved it so much. It is really for kids, but it was still very enjoyable. I think I understand why the books were so successful. I think they were written around the year 2000. Sometimes a little bit of the story betrays that. So they talk about the internet as if it's something really modern and very, exciting, that he's using the internet to find clues about, things that he needs to decipher. So you're like, okay, yeah, well, I guess for kids nowadays, they can't even imagine a time that before the internet. This is, by the way, the sound of the trailer.
We want to know everything about the man you work for.
The man? Oh no. This isn't about the father. This is about the son.
So the original story, the book, tells the story about this boy, Artemis Fowl, 12 years old, who is a criminal mastermind. He stems from a very rich family that every generation has gathered more fortune by basically stealing it, and not even from the rich. They're just criminal people. And then at one point, they lose everything. And the circumstances under which they lose their family fortune are different from the movie. And then this young boy is the only one who's left. I think his father dies at one point, and his mother goes mad. And so he still has to take care of his mother, but, one day she remembers who he is, and then a few minutes later, she doesn't know him anymore. Very complicated family situation, and this 12-year-old boy needs to figure out a way to kind of reclaim the fortune of his family. And he does that by doing the unthinkable, and that is by kidnapping a fairy. And fairy in the world of Artemis Fowl stands for basically any fairy tale character. So it's not just a fairy like a Tinkerbell, for instance, but also dwarves and gnomes and whatnot. So anyway, he kidnaps this elf or this fairy, and then the fairies, of course, who live underground. There is this big secondary world deep below the crust of the earth where these fairies live. They want to liberate their secret agent or whatever it is. I think, no, the fairy is actually kind of more of a police officer / detective. And so they want to liberate her, obviously. And then Artemis tries to prevent that. Later on in the story, they'll end up, teaming up. But anyway, in this first book, they're still enemies. And what is great about the book is that it's a very nice balance that they find between, the boy actually being a criminal mastermind. And he's not really moral or anything, but it is presented in a very sympathetic way. And you still root for him because, well, he's just smart. And it's kind of an unexpected hero for a children's book or kind of young adult stuff. And that makes him interesting. It's kind of not the norm. So what the movie did was to present us with a different version of the story where the father is still very much there, and the father gets abducted by some kind of evil fairy that is not in the book at all. And then it turns into this convoluted story where Artemis Fowl has to find an artifact, as device that is somehow threatening the world, and that actually shows that Artemis is not really a criminal mastermind. He's in fact a very moral, savior archetype who just happens to use unconventional methods to reach his goal. And then he has to somehow free his father from the clutches of a mysterious kind of hooded person, where during the entire movie you think we're going to get the reveal who that is, and maybe someone that we know. But no, it's just this anonymous enemy. That's not the only thing that's wrong with this movie, but let me first play a little bit more of the trailer.
Artemis Fowl. You've grown strong, son.
So in the trailer and also in the movie, Artemis Fowl is presented as this very sportsman-like kid. He's shown surfing and fighting and martial arts expert. Totally different from the books. In the books, he is just this kid who is very pale, always sits in front of computers and reading books, and actually very unpopular with other kids because he is not the sportsman type. And so, again, another way in which the movie radically departs from the character that the fans of the book series know and love.
Smarter than I ever imagined.
Then take me with you.
You're all I have now, Artie. There's just one very important thing I have to do.
Authorities launched a worldwide manhunt for the famous collector. He is suspected to have been behind some of the biggest robberies ever.
Dad.
So in the movie, Artemis Fowl discovers all of a sudden that his father is actually wanted and is considered to be a criminal. He himself did not know that. again, so different from the book, where, the charm of this character is that, yes, he's 12 years old, but he's already just like his father and grandfather and the whole family before him. Just another criminal who is just very smart. And in the movie, the boy is played by a young actor, but unfortunately not directed very well. This is just one of those victims of very, very bad directing. Everything is wooden. Everything is stiff. His dialogue is terrible. And he is so unsympathetic. You never root for him. He shows no emotion. And even the relationship with his father is without any depth. The father goes away at the start of the movie and only returns at the very end. But you have no emotional connection. You see no real connection between the father and his boy. So it makes the whole quest to find his father kind of, I don't know, not very. There's not much at stake. You don't feel the emotion, nor of the reunion. So it's almost as if Disney thought, well, we can't really make a movie about a boy who is a criminal mastermind because, well, we're Disney and children have to be moral and have to be an example to other kids, thereby taking away what makes this series stand apart from all the other books for children and teenagers. It's the essence of the story. It's even in the subtitle that this is Artemis Fowl is a criminal mastermind. You take away the criminal, you take away the entire reason for this story to exist.
Hello? Your family has taken something of great value from us. Return it to me or I will destroy everything you love.
Well, that, of course, is the MacGuffin. There is this device, and it's kind of unclear, and it doesn't really matter that much. It's this kind of strange CGI object, and whatever.
You weren't supposed to see this yet.
This is where the trailer introduces us to the second very important character from the books that they completely butcher and turn into a completely uninteresting character. So in the books, this butler is the lifeguard, the personal protector of Artemis Fowl. He is a butler, but he's also incredibly powerful and very strong and very dark. It's a very dark character. Here in the movie, they completely toned it down, made him into this, yes, he's a kind of a strong guy, but so boring, so bland. Don't get me started. I mean, the fans of the books must be so disappointed. And again, they turn him into an uninteresting character so that the moment that there is a threat, that he is in danger, you don't really care that much because, well, why is he even there? Artemis Fowl in the movie doesn't really need him.
Your father is in a complicated profession. For years, he has protected powerful secrets that have kept mankind safe from the dangers of another world. It's time to face your destiny.
Now, this is where you already in the trailer see the main issue that I have with this movie. Artemis Fowl is full of exposition. It is tell, don't show. Even the storytelling device that they use for most of the first half of the movie is pure exposition in the worst form. So the trailer started with this dwarf, right? This guy is like very dirty looking, it's big beard, hair. It's like a mini version of Hagrid. And who is taken captive and who has to tell the story of Artemis Fowl. Let me tell you the story of Artemis Fowl. Artemis Fowl was this 12-year-old boy who lived in a mansion in Ireland, and his father was a criminal master. And it just goes on and on and on. Instead of just telling the story the way it was written in the book, which is very gripping. Like the first chapter of the book, you're in China, and this kid is traveling the world, and then he comes across this text in runes, in fairy runes, and he tries to decipher it with a computer, and then he discovers that whoa, wait a minute, fairies are real, and what if and they possess a lot of gold. What if I kidnap one of those fairies and ask for gold? Then I can restore the fortune of my family, etc. I mean, in the book, it is told in such a way that you really want to know if he's going to succeed. Like heist movies. You know, what is the charm of heist movies? Like, oh, there's this plan, and there's this group of people, like Ocean's 11 or whatever, and they have a plan, and against all odds, they're going to break the bank. That is what makes the book so interesting, and you don't necessarily root for the morals of the character, but you root for the thief to get his prize. In the movie, they completely take that away and instead have this boring dwarf, and for some reason he's filmed in black and white, very gritty, but the character himself is not menacing at all. He's kind of a goofy, not very well written. I guess they wanted to present him as comic relief, and it doesn't work at all. Like, all the jokes fall flat. And he is just constantly narrating this voiceover, this boring voiceover that just drones on and on and on about Artemis Fowl and tells you what you actually see. Not that there is much to see, because most of the movie, literally 2/3, is just random action of the worst kind. Oh, let's just do a fight with 10,000 fairies that are floating around, clearly CGI, inside a time-stopping bubble. And everything takes place in Ireland, around the mansion where Artemis lives. And the other stuff that they do constantly is the big Star Trek movie mistake, where they think that we're going to be wowed by what we see, and we like to stare at this wonderful fairy world for minutes and minutes and minutes. So there's this reveal of the underground fairy cave or whatever, and it's just one of those run-of-the-mill CGI worlds that we've seen so many times and so much better in Marvel movies, and they just float around, and it's, oh, isn't this wonderful? Isn't this wonderful? No, it's not. It doesn't serve the story. It's boring. It's backdrop. I don't want to look at a backdrop. Just give me something that happens. Well, unfortunately, nothing happens, and it's just CGI images with a voiceover of a dwarf. Boring. Let me see what else is happening. So his father is constantly in a dungeon, and he's not doing anything, basically. He's just a total victim. He has no role whatsoever in the entire story.
This is what they call greatness.
But we are not alone in this.
Mulch Diggum's just a talented giant dwarf.
And I'm Holly Short, your ally on the other side.
So Holly is this fairy, this elf that he kidnaps. I mean, that does happen in the movie, but it's much less interesting. It's very soon she's just basically his ally, and it totally takes away the tension. What makes the story of the fairy in the book so interesting is that this is a girl who is trying to show that girls can be cops too. So if she fails, then this whole emancipation of the female fairies will fail, and so there's this backstory that I thought was very kind of new and very modern for a book that was written around the year 2000, way ahead of its time. They completely removed that entire plot. Instead, she's the only dynamic that Disney gives her character is this tense relationship with her boss, played by the great Judi Dench. I mean, Oscar-winning actress, who is now a female version of the police boss in the book. And in the book, it makes sense that it is a man, because it's this whole opposition of, girls can't be cops, they can't be successful. And now they do Judi Dench, and she is already at the top of the food chain in the fairy world. So there is no reason for the female fairies to prove themselves because their boss is already successful and female.
It's real. All right. Save my father. Save the world.
Whole team ready, tell them we on deck.
Scared, Artemis?
I prefer scared to dead.
That sounded very convincing. Not, I'm scared to death. No, this kid has no emotions in the movie. And again, it's probably not the actor's fault. It is just the way he's directed and the terrible lines. And then we get Judi Dench, who for some reason constantly talks in a sort of growl. Like all the elves.
Coming.
You think you can beat us?
We'll see.
Who do you think you are?
I'm the next criminal mastermind.
You'd expect there to be something mastermindy about the story, right? Where he comes up with, great idea or something that no one saw coming and that shows what a genius it is. The only thing that this kid does is picking up a gun from a fairy and pointing it at other fairies and shooting them. And that's kind of the extent of his genius. It is not made clear whatsoever in whatever form that this boy is smart. Actually, he comes across as pretty dumb and emotionally completely handicapped.
Now look around, this is what they call greatness.
I didn't read much on trolls. Anything I should look out for? The teeth. They eat people. Good to know.
Again, the trailer, I think, is trying to make it look as if this is a funny movie and that there's a lot going on between the characters. None of that. This is just random quotes. It is nothing. Nothing is interesting. Even this fight that takes place at the mansion, which is one of the most boring places on the planet. I mean, Ireland is beautiful, but they don't show Ireland in its beauty. It's just this cliff kind of the house. And it's very generic. There's really nothing Irish about the entire place. Okay, well, so that was the trailer. Now that I've seen the movie and I've read the books, I realize how little the trailer corresponded to the actual final result. The trailer was like, okay, well, we'll just wait and see. It kind of looks okay. Maybe this is popcorn entertainment. It's not. It is just one of the worst movie versions of a book that I've ever seen. That's saying a lot. And this is Disney in the year 2020. We know what makes for a good story. They've shown with The Mandalorian that they know how to tell good stories and to turn something that was kind of damaged property like the Star Wars. The way they were managing Star Wars was not very popular with some Star Wars fans, but with The Mandalorian, and I've just recently watched the entire documentary series about The Mandalorian. It kind of showed that whoa, they know how to tell stories. This is the Disney that we need. This is the Star Wars that we want. Why didn't they apply that to a new franchise that they clearly wanted to be a success, and put some storytelling talent on Artemis Fowl? How can you mess up a book series that works so well and has so many dedicated fans and completely make a travesty of the movie? It is all action, the final part of like 1/3 of the movie. It's all about this very generic fight of the fairies versus the few people there. And the ending is so unsatisfying and so boring and so bland and so not emotional. And a huge failure. And it just boggles the mind that they have been able to mess this up. It's just they should get a prize, maybe the Razzies, a prize for the worst failure in translating a good book into just a terrible movie. Terrible movie. That is my review. Let's move over to the chapel. It is time for a visit to the Peculiar Bunch.
Catholics rock!
Here at the Peculiar Ones, we're always happy to tell you everything you always wanted to know about Catholics, but you were afraid to ask.
Catholics can be a peculiar bunch. No meat on Friday.
Oh, meat? What do they eat? Light bulbs?
And today I just want to talk about stuff that's going on in the Catholic Church right now. And it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Man, you guys got more crazy rules than Blockbuster Video.
Well, a mixed bag, I guess, in terms of topics, because it's a little bit all over the place. So first of all, in many countries in the world, churches are reopening. Here in my own country, the churches have been opened to small groups of faithful at the beginning of June. Unfortunately, in my parish, they, for some reason, did not think it was feasible to open the churches for the faithful. So they decided to move it over to July the 1st. And from what it looks like, we can now, as long as people keep a distance of about 1.5 meters, and communion is distributed according to very strict protocols, then basically we can resume church life again. Unfortunately, of course, it means that we can fit much less people in the church than we had parishioners. I say we had because we don't know if people are going to go back, if the elderly already dare to go to church again. And most of the people that go to church in the Netherlands are pretty old. They're 70 plus, the majority. So it's kind of wait and see if how church life will pick up itself. And there's also another problem, another issue that I'm kind of struggling with in my own this local parish. The bishops asked the local churches to open their churches and to distribute communion using a communion screen. So it's a transparent PVC screen that is placed near the altar, and the faithful have to approach the screen. Behind the screen is the priest, and they have to extend their hands under the screen, and the priest will drop the host in their hands using tweezers, basically, liturgical tweezers. There's actually an existing liturgical object for that. That was also used in other times where, there was a risk of infection, and they still wanted to distribute communion. The thing is, I have in my two parishes where I am assisting, they've decided to do something different and to get these coughing masks. So basically transparent helmets that you see in hospitals where they're used, for instance, in intensive care. But then it's not just the helmet, of course. They also wear the mouth mask and other protective clothing like gloves and everything. Here the parishes thought, well, what if we just do the helmets, and then if the priest coughs, then, the droplets at least will not infect the parishioners. From the start, I was not very comfortable with that solution. I thought the communion screen was much safer because there's a real separation between me and the parishioners that want to receive communion. Whereas now with the masks, they want the priests to go in the benches. So there is always a bench that is empty between the various parishioners. But then with the helmet, I have to distribute communion to the people in church. In some of our bigger churches, that is 100 people. But it means, in the practical situation, that I step into this 1.5 meter zone 100 times while distributing communion. And that just doesn't make me feel very comfortable. We're not supposed to wear mouth masks. We're not wearing any protection other than that transparent mask over my face. And I don't think it's as safe as the communion screen. So I voiced my opposition, and unfortunately it was overruled. They decided, well, we're just going with the communion masks. What makes it, in my case, extra difficult is that my father, as you know, is in a care center. And very vulnerable in terms of his health, and so are the people around him. They've already had a number of infections, and people died of COVID-19. So the rules now, and these are national rules, are that only 2 people can visit my father. And these have to be the same people, and these people have to be extra careful in not getting infected, not exposing themselves to many other persons. So it made sense to my mom and I that I would be the second person next to my mom. My mom is living almost permanently in quarantine. She doesn't go out at all. She's extremely careful. And so am I. I live here in the rectory alone. I don't have kids or any other family members that could bring the infection to me. So I'm kind of the logical second person. And plus, they asked my father, who is, because of dementia, quite confused. But my mom asked my father, who should be the second person? And she thought, we're just going to ask his aunt, or actually his sister, my aunt, who lives in the same town as where the care center is located. But my dad said, well, I'd like to see Roderick. So now I'm the second person who is visiting my father regularly. And of course, I don't want to be in a situation where maybe I get infected by distributing communion by stepping into that 1.5 meter zone multiple times during the weekend services, the masses that I celebrate. Because even the slightest chance that I could infect my father, and in the case of my father, if my father get COVID-19, he'd die. He has very bad lungs. He's extremely frail. I don't want to play with the life of my father. I mean, I'm very much aware of my job as a priest, and I would absolutely love for people to receive communion, but not with this mask and stepping into the 1.5 meter zone. So I've been having quite a few altercations with the parish people here, and right now the situation is that they don't really want to offer an alternative. They really think that, well, the other 2 priests have decided to wear that mask, and that should be enough, or the helmet, and that should be enough. And I don't agree. So it's been a little bit of a tricky situation. I guess the only solution is that in masses that I celebrate, someone else is distributing communion and goes into the benches. I don't want to risk it. But this is the very first time in my life as a priest that I had to choose between my parents and my work as a priest. And that has been a very difficult, and normally I don't like to get into conflicts like this, but I feel that my conscience asks me to choose for the safety of my father, and by the way, also my mother. If I would infect my father, my mom would also be infected. I only have 2 parents, right? And they're not replaceable. I am not going to take that risk. So I tried to explain that. I'm still waiting for the response. I'm a little bit sad that it had to come to this. If my parishes would have just followed the general, national rules, then there wouldn't be a problem at all. But now there is, and it's really not my fault. But it's a tricky situation. But I choose my parents, and if that's not good enough, then I don't have a problem, but the parish has. Anyway, so that's a kind of a personal an example of, what is obedience in this case. Of course, as a priest, I promised obedience to my bishop and to his successors. But obedience has its limits. It is confined to the morals, of course, of the church, to faith, to everything that is really essential to the Catholic faith. It does not mean blind obedience, in the sense that if my bishop would call me up and say, I hereby command you to wash my car, I could tell my bishop, I didn't think so. You just wash it yourself. And I would not break any ecclesial law. Obviously not. In this case, it's I think similar. This is not a matter of morals or faith or theology or anything. So if the bishop agrees for this, my parish to basically choose a different solution than the general protocols, then that is not the same as a commandment for me to do it that way. I think if I just say, well, I just want to follow the general protocols in the Netherlands, then that I don't think I'm breaking any church law. And I'm not a church, how you call that, a law expert. So if anyone out there is more knowledgeable than I am open to suggestions. But right now, I feel that actually my conscience, and that is a very important treasure, I think, in the Catholic Church. There is no higher authority than my personal conscience. Now, that conscience, of course, does not mean that I can just make up the rules myself. It has to be an informed conscience. So you need to listen to what the church teaches. You need to read about it, try to understand. But ultimately, I can never act against my conscience. And if I do, it would actually be sinful to ignore your own conscience. Let's say you have a bishop who loses his mind and say, well, hey, I command all my priests to collaborate with the Nazis. I don't know what. Then priests have the obligation to listen to their conscience and to not obey their bishop in this case. Or what if a bishop is corrupt? And we've had so many examples of corrupt bishops, or bishops that are not if it goes against what the church teaches, then there's actually an obligation to listen to your conscience before you listen to your bishop. So it's not a military type of obedience in the church. In this case, I feel that when I try to protect my parents and my father especially, and thereby asking my parish to give me another option rather than this exception that they thought they should implement with the helmets, the transparent helmets, and no other protection whatsoever. I think if I ask for the ability to just follow the general rules, which have been worked out in conjunction with the government, and thereby protecting my father, I am actually not only obedient to my conscience, but also to the commandment that I should respect my parents, my father and my mother. And, well, anyway, that's how I look at it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I hope that they can accommodate me. And if not, well, I'm not just going to change my mind because there is pressure that all priests should do the same. And no. To me, that is just not important enough. Not as important as the health of my parents. Anyway, in other news, last week we celebrated the Feast of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And that is a very peculiar feast in the Catholic Church, which, if you are a little bit familiar with the Catholic imagery and you've ever been to a church, you may have seen these statues of Jesus, usually in a red robe, white alb, pointing at his heart. And it's a heart on the outside of his body. And it usually has a crown of thorns around it and a flame on top of it, and sometimes some, flames that are surrounding, or like a corona of, maybe that's the wrong word, a crown of light surrounding it, and Jesus pointing at that heart. It used to be very popular devotion about a century ago, and many Catholic families would have a Sacred Heart statue in their homes as a reminder of the love of Jesus for them. Especially the Jesuits have been spreading this devotion, as far as I've read. Now, it's the kind of image that doesn't work that well anymore for our modern sensibilities. I always thought that those statues of the Sacred Heart of Jesus were a little bit too sweet for my taste. And so I've always kind of disregarded this feast as it's just this kind of cheesy, a little bit outdated tradition, and maybe it's time to replace it with something else. Well, I don't think I was right by thinking that and by discarding it just based on the imagery, because ultimately the feast itself is, I think, very central to, I think, one of the core messages of the Catholic faith, and that is that God is love, and that Christ is the embodiment of that love. So if you want to understand who God is, you have to look at what Jesus does. And everything that Jesus does is filled with his heart. The heart, of course, it's not the physical heart, but it is the symbol of our feelings, are the kind of the seed of our soul, and it is what we associate with love. And actually, the symbol itself is not that weird if you consider that without the heart, we die. The heart is what pumps the blood around and also fills the blood with new oxygen. Very much like love is what makes the world turn in a certain way, even though in some cases it's money, but it's supposed to be love from a Christian perspective. And it is the heart of Jesus, it is his love that kind of gives our heart, our capacity to love, new oxygen. So if we have difficulty to loving each other, then we should go to Jesus and ask, just like we would go to the heart, our kind of oxygen-deprived blood would go to the heart and be fueled again. That is kind of how it works in our faith as well. If we have difficulty loving and acting out of love, we should go to Jesus and ask him to fill us with his love, and then pump that love into the world. So in a way, it's not a bad metaphor at all. It's just that I wish that they would kind of modernize the imagery surrounding this feast a little bit. But maybe that just takes a little bit more time, especially now that church in the Western world is predominantly filled with older people that are still familiar with that iconography of that generation. Maybe it just takes a generation for this to renew itself. But I don't think that the symbolism of the heart is broken at all. If you look at social media, it's filled with hearts, the emojis, so many hearts there. So yeah, I think it should be updated, but maybe we should make a new statue of Jesus just sending heart emojis to his followers. Who knows? Maybe that was sacrilegious.
When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics?
Last night. The packet. The extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the reading?
Okay, I'm sitting here in the main living room of my virtual house in Animal Crossing, and I have a typewriter, and I can type on it, and it makes these little clicky sounds. I love it so much. And, this is how I learned how to type, on a real typewriter. And it made these sounds like the clickety-clickety-click. And then you had to move to the next line with this lever on the right side, and you would give it a swing, and then it would just do this ping. And I love that my mom, when I think I was 10, maybe, that she sent me to this typing course. It was a lot of hard work, but I still can type at an incredible speed. I think it's because that is, it's muscle memory. Typing is muscle memory. That is why I always enjoy reading books. It always, like, if there was a eternal life, I'd probably spend at least a few centuries of that eternal life just writing books and writing stories. And it's kind of unfortunate that I don't have time to write stories, because as a child, one of my ambitions, one of the many things that I would want to become once I was old, was to become a children's book writer. I was a huge fan of Roald Dahl, and I was always writing these short stories for the local school paper. Most of them were kind of science fiction stories or fairy tale stories. And I always imagined myself later to, do at least that as a job on the side. So when I read Harry Potter, for instance, I was like, oh, if I'd read that, if those books had come out when I was a child, that would have been my favorite series. And I would be all over, just writing similar stories. Or right now, reading Artemis Fowl, and I'm thinking, this is just so genius. I wish I'd come up with that idea of writing a children's book where the main character is a criminal mastermind. Forget about the movie. Just go read the books. So I've recently started reading Artemis Fowl. It is a very quick read. The books are definitely for a younger audience. I guess 12 and older. And so I'm easily breezing through those books quite fast. Then after I'm done with reading Artemis Fowl, I want to move over to another book that I've received from Samuel Varg from Sweden, who sent me this book as a birthday present. Not on my birthday, but on his birthday. You got to love it. And the book is by one of my favorite fantasy writers. I'm trying to look it up, but of course it's not in my... I'm browsing through my Kindle library, but it's not in my Kindle library because he gifted me the audiobook. And it is the first book of the Mistborn series. And I've heard great things about it. It's written by Anderson. Let me look that up. Mistborn. Maybe I can find a Wikipedia entry with some plot points for you. So Mistborn is a series of epic fantasy novels written by American author Brandon Sanderson, published by Tor Books. And the first book is called The Final Empire, and I've got that one in audiobook version, and I think it is like 24 hours long, or it's a huge book, 600 plus pages. What first made me aware of the existence of Brandon Sanderson is that he was the author who finished the Wheel of Time book series when the original author passed away. So he picked it up. He was a huge fan. And again, this is just based on what I've heard because I haven't finished the Wheel of Time series yet. He did a tremendous job. And this is one of the most prolific fantasy writers that I've ever seen. He's also very active on YouTube. And I'm having a blast watching his signing session. So what he does is, just look him up. So his name is Brandon Sanderson. He goes in, I guess, what is his attic? Or maybe it's his garage. And he sits down at a table and personally signs copies of his books. And then while he does that, and he's signing hundreds and hundreds, for like 2 or 3 hours, he's just chatting with the audience and answering questions. And this guy has an encyclopedial knowledge, so just ask him anything, and he'll just talk about his experiences in writing this or that book, or he'll go in detail about certain characters. It's incredible what he's been able to pull off, and a very sympathetic guy. So as soon as I start reading Mistborn, I'll let you know what I thought of it. But I'm kind of enjoying this new phase in my life where I'm plowing my way through, hundreds and hundreds of pages of fantasy novels. I hope I won't get burned out on it, but so far so good. I'm really enjoying the experience.
We are on the cutting edge of technology.
Wow. Well, what does that mean?
Let's plug it in. It's going to say, hey, I see you plugged in a new device. And it's going to load in the appropriate drivers. You'll notice that this scanner build... Whoa.
Well, all your technology stuff, it just ends in disaster.
But there is one more thing.
There's absolutely one more thing that we need to talk about. And of course, it's WWDC in... well, the virtual world. It is the annual Apple Developers Conference, which I've always followed because of the software announcements and the hints that Apple would give in terms of where they see their particular technology develop. And there's usually not new hardware that is presented, which of course is what we love the most when Apple comes with a new phone or a new iPad or, in the future, new AR glasses. But these developer conferences are still very interesting to see where this market leader, because Apple is definitely leading the way in many aspects. It has a lot of imitators, where Apple is taking the industry. And because of COVID-19, they did not do a real developers conference, but they did a virtual one. And for a couple of days, they've streamed videos, most of which were very well produced. And they, for the first time, they showed off their new saucer-shaped headquarters. And that was pretty cool. They used the spaces very much, like every part of the presentation was taking place in another part of the campus. And the only thing that was a little bit disappointing, I thought, was how barren everything looks surrounding the campus. So they have planted a lot of trees and plants, but I guess it's just very dry where this campus is located in, is it Palo Alto? And so everything looked very, I don't know, barren, and I hope they never get a fire inside the saucer, because that would be pretty difficult to repair if everything goes up in flames. But anyway, it was interesting, a little bit weird, a little bit surreal. You see all these familiar characters that we know from their on-stage performance, and they're very good on stage. Apple is extremely good. I think it's maybe one of the companies that knows how to do this best. And it's all thanks to Steve Jobs, who had a knack for, getting the audience wild about even the slightest things. I don't think that Tim Cook has the same charism, but he does hand it over to a number of other people that I think were very good at presenting the latest development. So here are a few of my notes, and I'm just sharing kind of the main my main impressions from the first day of WWDC. First of all, they showed us a new version of iOS. iOS is, of course, the operating system of the iPhone, and then it had a couple of spin-offs. So now they've got iPad OS, they've got TV OS, iOS TV, Watch OS, iOS, or Watch OS, I think. And then you've got, of course, Mac OS, which is the operating system for Mac. And there were a few interesting developments here. For the phone, they just continue to make the overall experience consistent with what they've done on the iPad. And they've created something that I think is very handy. It's an app library. So normally, if you have a phone, and it doesn't matter if you've got an Android phone or an iPhone, you have a ton of screens with icons. And I only use the first two screens, because all my important apps are on the first two screens, and I never really look at the other screens. Well, Apple knows this problem, and they also know that the reason that you have, a lot of the apps in the screens in the back of the phone in a certain way is because, well, you've launched them a couple of times, but you don't use them on a daily basis. So you're probably not going to look at all those pages unless they find a new way to group the icons. And so it has an automatic cataloging of these apps, and they present the apps grouped together in a logical way, and very visual. I just loved it. I was like, wow, this is so much better than what Android is doing with their app library, where the Android operating system is a little bit different. It has also screens on which you can place icons, but these icons are from a layer underneath the screens of your phone, and that is just this huge library of apps in alphabetical order. And you can say, well, hey, I want this app to show up on one of my screens on the phone, and these, I want to have them on my device, but I don't need to access them very often. So on my Android phone, I have this long list of apps, some of which are very important, and I use them a lot, and others I just want to have them around just in case, but I may launch them just once every year. So maybe Android can emulate this idea. I liked it very much. Then the other innovation for iOS 14 is the integration of widgets, which Apple has had for a while. They kind of took that from the Android operating system. And for the first time, you can do something that is slightly similar to what Android users have been able to do for a long time, and that is to implement these widgets, to integrate the widgets in the app screens. So instead of just having these same looking pages with just, square icons, you can now add widgets that are rectangular or bigger or smaller. Every app can have multiple versions of the widgets. And it makes for a very nice looking presentation. And also very handy because you don't want to swipe left and then go through this long list of widgets that also, at least on my iPhone, take a long time to load its contents. You want to have them available on the first few screens that you always use. So I thought that they did a good job. It did remind me, however, a lot, and correct me if I'm wrong, but remember Microsoft Tiles? That they had phones, Windows phones, and what set these phones apart is that the screens of those phones were covered in tiles. Microsoft thought that this was going to be all over the place. They even tried to, at one point, to make Windows completely tile-based, and that proved to be a big failure and not loved at all, so they kind of minimized that in subsequent releases of the Microsoft operating system. But now Apple is, I think, doing what Microsoft intended to do, but they do it, I think, much better. That is what Apple does. Not always very original, but they take good ideas from other platforms, and then they think about it a little bit longer, and well, they make it work. So I was impressed by that, and like, wow, okay, that is. I think a lot of iPhone users are gonna like this a lot. Then they also upgraded the iPad OS and introduced, ta-da, the sidebar. I was like, okay, so you mean that the iPad is now working like a computer? They present it as if it's this huge innovation. And I'm thinking, okay, so you're just using a computer interface now for your iPad. It totally makes sense, but they could have done this years ago. So anyway, I'm glad it's there. I still have an iPhone or an iPad. Unfortunately, it does not update anymore. It's too old. So, but if I ever go for another tablet, the only tablet that is high on my list is the big iPad. It is very expensive. It's more than $1,000, but that is the one selling point of Apple, is that everything works. Android tablets usually are quite nice too, but they only have an upgrade cycle of about 2 years, and then your device is already outdated. For Apple, it's usually 5 years. So yeah, I'm still really excited about the iPad. I use it every day. It is maybe the device that I use the most of all my mobile devices. I only use my regular desk computer more than my iPad. So it's really, I think, had a good return on investment for me. So what else was interesting? I loved what they did with the AirPods. I will never buy AirPods because they're super expensive. I just have Chinese Bluetooth pods, which cost me literally less than $12. And they're wonderful, and I use them all the time. But what they did with the AirPods was auto switching. So because it's all integrated, the Apple knows if you're holding a phone in your hand or an iPad, and it will just seamlessly switch the AirPods to the device that you're using at the time, whether it's a laptop or a phone or tablet. Whereas with my EarPods, I have to turn off the Bluetooth on one device, turn it on the other device, pair it. It will auto pair, but still, it's a bit of a hassle. It's not as seamless. So that is very cool. But then you pay a price for those AirPods. And spatial audio. That was very interesting. So they've created spatial surround sound type audio processing with these earbuds. And I'm thinking this is in preparation for their AR glasses. That is such an AR type of thing. It's not very useful. They tried to present it as if this would be uber cool for video conferencing, but I'm thinking that's not enough of a reason. So I'm thinking this is already pointing towards the next big thing that Apple is going to present, and that is going to be augmented reality. And you definitely need spatial audio for that. So mind my words, this is all in preparation for the big AR release or our announcement later this year. And then they finally showed us some improvements for the Mac operating system, now called Big Sur, which, I don't know, they keep being very America-centric in their names. It's all, probably nature parks in the U.S., but if you're not from the U.S., like, what the heck is Big Sur? Anyway, they now have converged the operating system style from the iOS and then made the macOS look much more like the iPad operating system, and I don't think it's an improvement at all. I really hate the colors and the look of the iOS operating system. Never liked it from the start, and now my computer is going to look like that? Ew. No, thank you. They made the icons a little bit more like the old icons on the phone, so they gave it more depth. So it's kind of, in my opinion, like going back. They at one point with Johnny Ives being in control of the look of the operating system, everything had to be super flat and boring. Now they're bringing 3D back to the icons, but they say, well, that's because the computers are so powerful, so it's only going to be on macOS. I think the next step is going to be that they're going to implement that on iOS as well, because these icons look nicer. People just want to have nice icons. Anyway. But I'm not looking forward to my Mac looking like a big iPad, because it's just not nice. I don't like it. Anyway. And then the biggest reveal was right at the end of this very long video. It was more than an hour and a half long. And it is the announcement that Apple would be switching in the upcoming years to their own chips. No longer will they use Intel, but they're going to transition just like they did from PowerPC to Intel chips. They're going to transition everyone to these proprietary chips that are based on the chips that they already developed for iPad. And I think that's probably a good thing, because these chips are incredibly powerful. So they're going to, I think, outpace Intel very, very quickly. The only downside, of course, is that all developers will need to make their apps work with these new chips. So, yeah, that may be a problem for some of them. Hey, it is time for me to pour myself a cup of coffee and wrap up this show. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you want to hear more of me, then maybe you want to consider becoming a patron, because then you get another one of these shows every week called Father Roderick to the Max. And, in this week's Father Roderick to the Max, I'll talk about everything that I couldn't get to in this show. So I'll give you my favorite recipe for spaghetti aglio e olio. We'll talk a little bit about a new Lord of the Rings game. I'll talk a little bit about liturgy and about the role of the altar. We'll talk about body language and a very cool YouTube channel that I've recently discovered. And maybe I'll talk a little bit more about Star Trek and about the Obi-Wan series in preparation for Disney+. All that and more on the show that I produce exclusively for my supporters in the Patreon community. Again, if you want to join them, it's as simple as, or it's as little as $2.50 a month. I hope that is not going to be an impediment for any of you. And you get to, join the club. So go over to patreon.com/Father Roderick. Thank you in advance. Thanks for listening. I'll be back. Take care and God bless. And that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen, out there in the YouTube sphere. Unfortunately, my notes were hiding your comments, so I've not been able to read any of your comments while I was doing the show, but I'm back now, so I can scroll back. So who of you has not seen my island yet? Well, I will just show you what I've done over the past few days. I'll just make this a little extra, bonus segment after I'm done recording the show. I'll just give you a tour and show you some of the improvements, hopefully improvements that I've done to my island. Let's see who is in the chat. Oh, a lot of people in the chat. We've got Dirk is there, and Schilschild from Eemnes, which is a village that's part of the parishes that I serve. Joe Lou wants to know, have you gotten any negative feedback for evangelizing this way? Asking because I'm setting up to do the same, especially in this time. No, I've had, years ago, people were skeptical about this way of using, pop culture to reach people. But they've seen the results, so they know that it works. Oh, it's going to stop raining. You see that? I see a little bit of sunshine. I've got a very stark shadow, so very soon I'll be able to lie down on my new... This is new. I can just enjoy the sun. Right now I'm being rained upon, but I love my little chill-out space. And look at that cliff in the distance. This is also something that I built. I'm not entirely happy with the way it looks, but I wanted to... These cliffs are... This used to be a very small patch. It looked very, very small. It was just a tree and then a Easter Island statue on the side of it. Now I built these two cliffs and I just wanted to, by putting the sandcastle on top of it, I wanted to make it look bigger than it actually is. And then I put a lot of plants there. They kind of spoil the perspective, so maybe I'll remove everything again. I tried to put some miniature trees on top of the cliffs. That didn't work. They grew into big, solid trees, so that also didn't work. Let's see, what else have I got in terms of comments? Joel4LK, hello there. Fencium says, happy to be watching a live video, finally. Hi, all the way from Puerto Rico. Hola! Let's see. Samuel is saying... What four corners of the Netherlands? It only takes 2 minutes to walk from edge to edge. Yeah, well, it's not Sweden. That's for sure. As a filmmaker, I tip my hat to you wanting to travel by bike with all the equipment. Yeah, well, I usually travel light. I have very lightweight equipment. I have a small drone and everything. It's kind of, I like a challenge. The movie, Artemis Fowl, has 12% on Rotten Tomatoes. Why am I not surprised? Mike Kuipers is there. Heist movies, one of my favorite genres. Yes, mine too. I love it. American Mapper is there. Noah is there. Doshi said, when I saw the trailer, I knew this would be terrible. Disney has problems making a movie based on books. Wrinkle of Time. Apparently, yeah, I've not watched Wrinkle of Time. I'm not familiar with the books, but I heard it was so bad that they didn't release it in Europe. They did straight to video. Disney should have never touched this story. They need to get over their obsessive need for making a profit and actually trust the story to tell itself without interfering. Here. I totally agree. Jamie likes my chapel. Very good. Yeah, so I'm glad I'm not the only one who was disappointed by the policy of my parish. Yeah. Oh well. We'll see if they agree with my proposal now that someone else distributes communion. I think if I explain that to my parishioners, I've been a priest here for 15 years. If I tell them this is to protect my father, no one is going to have trouble with this. Everybody's going to understand. So, if only they would trust the priest that has been here longest. Oh well. Let's see. Oh, Ryo and Brandon Inspiration is watching from Japan. How cool. I hope you like I've been a little bit inspired by Japanese city building when I was doing this part of the town. Let me clean this up here a little bit before I show you. So this is my viewpoint. I wanted to create a place where you could look at the, far away in the distance. So this is, I kind of like this. Still need to modify it a little bit, but there's a bit too much stuff in the background. But I still like this in the evening. A lot of people that are building their islands, they don't use perspective that much. But I like to have all these different levels and little alleys and kind of make the place feel big. Here's a little secret passage to the bridge here. Look at this nice... I love this. This is one of my favorite spots of the island. And this little bridge. Who likes Eric the Elk? He's moving from my island if anyone wants him. Sounds interesting. Owen. Jamie says it would be cool if you wrote your memoirs. Actually, I wrote a book. It's called Geek Priest. It's no longer available, but that has the first, 12, 15 years of my life as a media priest. The Dresden series by Jim Butcher. Oh, okay. Hello, I love Steven Universe. I can tell you about Big Sur that it's a park in California. Okay. I should try Linux. I have tried Linux, but it's a little bit too finicky for me. I'm just not smart enough for Linux, I think. Alright, so this is kind of the more interesting part of my island. I haven't done much in terms of expanding it. I need to start working on the left part of my island. I'm just kind of always like, okay, but what am I going to do? So I keep improving and micromanaging this part. So here's my main street. Here is the local store. And then this is boring. It's just a whole field of what are the name of these things? Turnips. So I bought them on Sunday, and I'm just waiting for the price to go up on the stock market so I can sell them and be a millionaire again. So all this unfinished. Look at that whale. This is a huge whale. And I'm waiting for... There's sometimes a fisherman that comes on the island, and he'll pay a good price for those big fish. This is my collection of black roses. I'm trying to cultivate more of these golden ones, but for some reason, not being very successful. And then the rest is just trees. Not very interesting. So that's a little tour of... this is my place where I like to fish. Do I have a 5-star rating? Actually, I don't know. How long did all of this take me to build? Way more time than I want to divulge here. Oh, Samuel is trying to buy his way out of purgatory. I'm not sure if super chats can help you with that, Samuel, but I do appreciate the gesture. Don't worry about dissing my country. I do that all the time myself. The Dutch can handle it. All right, let me shoot this present out of the air. There we go. Let's see, what do we get? This is my Italian bird, and I want him to move because he's weird and scary. Flashy flower sign. Place item. Ew! Okay, that is a little bit too much out there. However, it does fit the Oriental theme. Wow. Okay. Maybe I'll just put this on the market. Or, like, let's see. I'll just place it here somewhere. Oh, next to that vending machine, maybe? Oh, no, there's not enough space here. Maybe I'll just put it here in the corner. Flashy flowers. It's very flashy. There you go. Oh, but now you can't see my fruit. Okay, I'll just take away the fruit. Oh, what? No, I'm going to place it elsewhere. Maybe right there on top of the thing. Let's see. So this is how I spend my time. Most people will call it, this is how I waste my time. Oh, boy. I could put it maybe here. No, there's not enough space. Or maybe on the other side. Can I jump there? No, I can't. How do I get there? It's a big maze, this. I probably have to jump here and then go here. Maybe. This is kind of still pretty... Oops. Pretty empty here. So this is where the... This is... Now you see how small it actually is. But when you're on the beach, it looks much, much taller than this. So it's kind of a forced perspective thing. Maybe I can put it here. Because I don't need this space. Yes, it does take a lot of patience to build this. Oops, I don't want to do that. But it's also very relaxing. Turn this around. Maybe like this. I'll just place it here. It's ugly. Could always move it again. Yes, it does take time, of course, but it is also... I enjoy just kind of creating. Oh, wait. What? Something is blocking my way? That's new. Oh, maybe I put instruments there. Yeah, I did. Oh, yeah, so... This guy is singing along. How cute is that? How cool is that? I can play these instruments. So sometimes these animals will stand here and sing, and it will just be random songs. But you see there's this little blue audio player there, and I can load songs, and then they will just actually sing along with whatever is playing on your radio. And it's very cute when there are like 4 or 5 singing. It is the cutest thing ever. Anyway, I'll just let the game music take over. I should keep it next to the fruit and rotate the sign. Okay. All right, Samuel. Good night to your son. All right, let's go back in the house. My subliminal advertising has made me want to switch. Oh, it's a wonderful community. I really like the friends that I made here, and they help me out a lot with, building my island, and I get ideas also from looking at other people's islands. I've definitely the Switch is expensive, and so is the game, but I've had so much fun with this. I definitely got my money's worth. So this is my little TV studio. One of my dreams is to record a show with guests, but then of course I need to have friends that both have a microphone and have something to talk about on a regular basis, and then they need to have a Switch. But then I could do my own little talk show here, even more fun than a podcast. But that's all in the future. So I've been building this. It's not ready yet, but it still already looks quite nice. I'm pretty happy with my little TV studio here. All right, I have to go and start making some food because I'm getting hungry. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you like what you saw, make sure you subscribe to the channel and leave a comment, and give it a thumbs up. That also helps. Speaking of music, you never cease to amaze me what a lovely singing voice you have during Mass. Well, thank you. Yes, when you get a Switch, definitely you will be my guest here on the show. And so is anyone else. If you want to be on the show, on this talk show, contact me. Let me know if there's a specific topic. I don't want people who just chat about random stuff, but I really like to have topics that are, like movies, or if there's an expertise, everything about astronomy or something like that. Stuff like that. So I can have you as a regular. I'd like to form a small crew of guests that I can invite multiple times so we can make this a consistent show. I think people would enjoy it. I would enjoy it. All right. See you guys later. Thanks for stopping by.